Welcome all. You're listening to the MLTI podcast, Teaching with Tech.
We are your hosts, the MLTI Ambassador team at the Maine Department of Education.
We are here to support Maine educators by building a network focused on authentic voices, experiences, and technology integration.
Hello and welcome to the MLTI podcast, Teaching with Tech. My name is Chris Beckwith, and I will be your host for both of November's podcasts. For those who are new to the podcast, each themed month will have 2 episodes dedicated to a single topic. This month, we will be covering computational thinking. Among other things, we'll discuss what CT is, what it might look like in the classroom, where it might be taught in our schools, and how it relates to computer science. But before we go any further, I'd like to announce this year's MLTI Student Conferences. We will be hosting 2 student conferences again this year, one virtual and one in person. Without giving anything away, I have to say that we are taking a new approach to this year's virtual conference, and we are pretty excited about the concept. The virtual conference will be on March 7th, and the in-person conference will be on May 23rd. You can go to our website at www.maine.gov/DOE/learning/LTT/conference for more details. At this point, I'd like to introduce my co-hosts and fellow MLTI ambassadors, AJ and Jeff. Welcome to the podcast. Can you each tell the audience a little bit about yourselves?
Hey, thanks, Chris. I'm AJ Rogg. I teach at Lyman Moore and been there for about 18 years, and I teach computer science, and before that I did a little media work as well. But I'm a first-year ambassador with the MLTI program, and I'm excited to be here.
Thanks, AJ. My name is Jeff Ireland. I am also a Year 1 ambassador. I come from Oak Hill Middle School, which is in RSU 4. And I've been in education now, I guess this is my 28th year, and I have taught a lot of things, a lot of math and science, and have spent some time as a building level administrator. Hey, Chris, I was just thinking about the intro, and I was wondering, how many people do you think really understand what computational thinking is? AJ, I know you have some experience teaching computational thinking. How would you describe that to somebody who doesn't have any experience with it?
So, as I told you earlier, I've been teaching computer science for like 18 years, and computational thinking is the foundation of my curriculum. I mean, that's really what I want my students to see the importance around how they solve problems, how they critically think about the activity that they're working on. And, most of that is coding that we work through. And those elements of computational thinking are just critical pieces that they truly need to understand, that not only what they are, but how to work with those. So, we're talking about algorithms, abstraction. Abstraction is taking out all those empty pieces that they don't really need, and the noise in the background. You want to take that away and really pinpoint what is the problem I'm working on. Looking for patterns, breaking down with decomposition, breaking down a problem, and then just thinking logically about how to solve what is in front of them is super important. And for me, as again, with computer science, we don't really have standards that the state has created for us. So we've kind of had to go find our own. And with this critical thinking, it really allows us to have these areas to really show the kids where they're shining, where they need some help, what they need to look and do better at, or what they're just cranking on and they truly just get, and then try to build on to the next, element that we're working on. So I just think defining these skills for students is helpful for them, because they can really see what they're working on and how it really affects them moving forward in the activities that they're working on. And it helps me as a teacher to really be able to pinpoint I guess, just their skills and be able to give them feedback on those skills. So for me, that's really the importance of critical thinking, or computational thinking, and how I use it in my classroom.
Thanks for that explanation, AJ. The more I learn about computational thinking, the more I realize that it's kind of the way that I have approached problem solving without really knowing that it had a name. And I think some people are more naturally predisposed to using computational thinking than others. It may be more of a challenge for other people. For me as a gamer, I relate to it because with a lot of the puzzles and problems that you have to solve in computer games, the elements of computational thinking are right there, and you can't proceed without applying them. AJ, you recently had a chance to interview someone with extensive knowledge of CT and CS. You tell us about that.
Yes, Chris. So I was fortunate to be able to interview Sean Wasson. He's a teacher at Lyman Moore that I have taught with for the past 8 or 9 years. He's also currently the president of CSTA Maine. So let's take a listen to what we had as a conversation. All right, so I'm here with Sean Wasson, who's the Maine CSTA president. So Sean, can you just give us a quick overview of what your role is as president of CSTA?
Sure. CSTA stands for the Computer Science Teachers Association, and I'm in my 4th year as the president of the chapter here in Maine. And before that, I spent 1 year as the vice president. Basically, the role is to offer mentoring towards other computer science teachers. Oftentimes, kind of be those co-workers that you don't normally have, because you might be the only computer science teacher in your building or your school district entirely. And whenever they say, okay, go together with your social studies department, English language arts department, something like that, these people don't have a home quite often. So we kind of try to provide that through social gatherings, professional development opportunities, just check-ins with each other, that type of thing, so they know they have a support system out there. And it's also a way of just providing opportunities, not just in-state that we might offer for PD, but also PD that's offered around the country. So we kind of try to be a jack of all trades to meet the computer science teachers or the people teaching a computer science class where they're at, and then providing them resources and just another set of voices to bounce ideas off.
So besides being the Maine CSTA president, I know you're a computer science teacher at Lyman Moore Middle School. Obviously, I know that because you and I have worked together for many, many years.
This is true.
But before switching to CS, did you teach something else?
Yeah, before I came to Lyman Moore, I had taught computer science before coming to Moore, but I was also a social studies teacher for a long time. And what happened was, when I was trying to break in as a teacher back in the 1990s, I was in ed tech for a few years, and there weren't any social studies jobs out there to be had at the time. And I went into the Master's in Education program for Instructional Technology at the University of Maine in Orono. And I earned my master's degree, and I was about halfway through the program, and suddenly there were a lot of computer science teacher positions opening, or new media as they called it back then. And Governor Angus King, now Senator King, he did a lot of the getting computers into schools. And I had a job doing that for a few years. And like anybody else, sometimes if you're in the teaching profession, you tend to get a little bit of burnout and you want to switch gears. And an opening finally came along to be a social studies teacher, which is what my original thing was. So I went and did that for quite some time and loved doing that. And then I drifted back into computer science again and landed here at Lyman Moore. So the fun part now is I kind of get to try to combine elements of both backgrounds when I'm teaching the class, because I'll teach the traditional stuff, but also try to talk about its impact on, Maine, American society, the world at large, so we can have those conversations that kind of delve in both disciplines.
So we've worked together for, 7, 8 years?
I think 8 years we worked
8
together.
years now?
This is year 9 for me or more.
So obviously you and I know our curriculums pretty well. So I know that as a CS teacher, we're teaching computational thinking skills throughout our entire lessons. But thinking back toward being a social studies teacher,
Do you see that you use computational thinking skills while you were teaching, now that you look back and really understand computational thinking?
Yeah, I do. And that's the funny part. It's like back then, I don't think I didn't have the term computation, but I look back now, I'm like, because one of the takes I do on computational thinking is basically taking a larger problem and trying to break it down into smaller pieces, solve one piece at a time to kind of an overall understanding. That's kind of like where I generally sit within that definition of computational thinking. And when as a social science teacher, that's what I was doing. It's like when we're trying to understand historical events and understanding what was going on at the time and trying to make a comparison to what we were doing at the time, late 20th century, early 21st century. There was a lot of comparing and contrasting, trying to understand how did people solve problems back then? What were the first steps? Looking at what worked and what didn't work and things like that. So the entire time we're having these conversations with students and working on projects to a lot of this. And now I look back and I'm like, wow, that was a lot of computational thinking type of elements. So it's a skill that I've been doing this now for a very long time, well over 25, 26 years now. And I didn't realize until just the last few years I've been kind of sitting doing this across both subjects, and I just didn't even know it at the time. That's the funny part. I'm like, oh yeah, that does make sense. That was computational thinking. Yes.
Yeah, I would agree that there's a lot of skills that are in there. So on that note, if someone were to come to you and say, hey, computational thinking is only a STEM curriculum, or it's only something that should be taught in STEM classes, what would you say to someone like that?
I tell them they're wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, when you talk about problem solving, which is the element of computational thinking that I generally gravitate to the most, problem solving it goes to everything in life. It's not just school either. It's like, how do you solve the situation that, what is called for at this point in time? It's what series of steps are you going to develop to resolve whatever the problem might be? Now, that could be something that you're doing in any academic discipline. It could be something as far as like you're building a deck on in your backyard. Like, how do you solve, doing this one thing at your house versus another? It could be conflict resolution. Everything at the end of the day is like, here's a problem. We need to solve that problem, whatever it might be. And what series of steps are we going to try to do? If you make a mistake along the way, you evaluate, figure out where the mistake was made, come up with a new plan, and try again. And this, honestly, it's just like computational thinking is just a term that got made up to make it easier to explain something to people. But the reality is, we do this in everyday life hundreds of times a day without even thinking about it. We're just not defining it. It's like every time you're trying to solve a problem, you're creating a series of steps to do it. And if it doesn't work one way, then you go back, try to think it through again, and try it a different way until you finally have success. And that's how you build up models and whatever discipline or thing in life that you're doing. It's organizational skills. It's figuring out trial and error, what works for you. And I think all those things kind of come back around, and you can kind of sit those things in the term computational thinking.
Totally agree with that. So I know as CSTA Maine president and the organization, you guys have been doing some work around some professional development for the state. Some of that has probably to do with computational thinking. Mm-hmm. I know you're doing some stuff with, music and AI, but can you give us a little bit of information about those PD offerings?
Sure.
And if you can link it to computational thinking at all, that would be awesome.
The first one coming up, it's actually later this month here in November. We are working with a music teacher out of one of the middle schools in Bangor. And she's doing a professional development really more for music teachers than computer science teachers. It's like how to integrate in computer science and music. And basically what we're trying to do in this year's platform for PD is to reach into other subjects and do the integration piece of like, how do you take a different subject and bring computational thinking and computer science into it. And in this case, it's basically like, here's some interesting software to try something different for music is what she's trying, what she's going to be going through, and basically be like, here's a new way of making music. And so that's the computer science element to it and music piece. But the computational thinking piece is teaching kids how to work with the software to create music, and then when they bump into a roadblock, learning the steps necessary to resolve it and then get past that roadblock to ultimately create art through music. So that's one thing there. When we're talking about artificial intelligence, that's another one that we're working on. I think that one's going to be geared directly more towards with social studies teachers. It could really apply to anybody, but I think we're gearing it towards social studies because AI has a huge impact right now on society at large, be it your local, state, federal, the world itself. And we're trying to understand the implications of a technology that really came out of nowhere, basically just under a year ago with ChatGPT, and trying to get a handle on it. And how does this impact everyday life? Because there are now a brand new set of apps and AI across a multitude of disciplines and a multitude of just social things that you can find in an app store. And we're just trying to figure out, like, how do you balance this with life? Because suddenly it just really threw everything for a gap. And the social studies element is really built around, like, how to use it safely, how to use it productively, and to also understand where bad people are doing bad things with AI and understanding how to protect yourself.
That's awesome. So are those the two big ones that are coming out?
Those are two of the big ones coming up. There's a series of others that right now we're still talking to people. Some of them, these are people we talked with at the Actum conference, and we really, a bunch of us at CSTA, really enjoyed what they presented, and we're asking them if they'd like to do a follow-up. And these are, again, Maine teachers that did great stuff, that had great presentations at the Actum conference back in October. And we're asking, like, would you like to continue this? Because we'd love to have you come on board and work with some teachers for an opportunity here to kind of continue what you were talking about and providing opportunity for those teachers from the conference to take it the next step that many of them wanted to do but didn't have the opportunity in that one day showing a few weeks ago.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Yeah, that was an amazing conference. So I'm just one more quick question just about computational thinking. Do you think or agree that computational thinking should be a standard that we see across the board in all curriculum, or is it something you feel kind of fits in CS or STEM, but just kind of like lives in those other ones?
I think we can see it most prevalent, obviously, in STEM disciplines. And for a traditional, everyday public school, that's going to be in your science and math classes, and hopefully a computer science class if that's available in that school. And that's where most of us generally think is where it sits. But the reality is there are other standards in the other disciplines that are computational thinking related. They're just not labeled computational thinking. There are standards in social studies, there are standards in ELA, there are standards in world language, and anything else that might be available at a school. Computational thinking skills are embedded in their standards. They're just not being called computational thinking. The thing I would like to see would be for school districts to say, we're working with computational thinking, and hopefully the leaders in those schools and school districts have done a little bit of pre-work to make life easier for the actual classroom teachers, and essentially pull out of their other standards across these other disciplines to be like, this is some of the stuff we're noticing, can you dig a little deeper? So that school-wide across subjects, we're all kind of using similar language when we're saying computational thinking. So if I go back and I'm a social studies teacher again, I'm hooking in on a social studies standard and I'm saying, this is what this means. And if I'm using the terminology computational thinking and they're hearing it in these other classes, like we'll say the STEM classes, then kids are starting to realize, okay, it's the problem-solving process. This is what these teachers are trying to teach me, and they're calling it different things, but it really comes down to this thing, computational thinking. And so, yeah, to answer the question, those things already exist in those standards. They're just not being called that. I think it would be kind of cool if we could pull that language out and define it so students would understand these skill sets exist across all their courses and not just this one set over off to the side.
Yeah, and I think schools have tried to do that for a long time, is try to have this common vocabulary.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that, hearing words like algorithm and,
Yeah.
critical thinking and all these terms that we would use around computational thinking, if they're hearing those in other classes.
And that's the thing is, like, I think it's if you can put that language in any discipline and be consistent in calling it this one thing instead of three different things, but it's really just this one thing, it avoids confusion for kids, and you're starting to drill the idea into their heads so that they understand the concept. I'm like, what they're asking me to do is to solve problems by a series of steps. When something doesn't work, to evaluate it, make a new plan, and try again. And if we could build something out on that type of consistent language across any subject, then I think ultimately it makes it easier for kids to understand, instead of being confused by, well, they're calling it this and these people are calling it that, and I'm hearing a third thing over here. If we're just using a common piece of vocabulary and we're just showing it through a different lens or a different prism in each class, ultimately the kids are seeing big picture, this one concept across everything. And I think it would make life a little easier for kids to understand, because then they're really learning the ability to solve problems through a multitude in a variety of ways.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, Sean, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk with us, and good luck with your PD sessions that you're going to put on, and hopefully we get to chat with you again later in the year, maybe around CSTA week or something like that.
I would love it. Thank you for having me on today.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Wow, great interview, AJ. Listening to Sean really made me think about how I might have actually been using computational thinking for a while and just didn't know that's what it was called. I think about how it really should be used in all curricular areas. It's not just a computer science thing or a science thing. It really could be used in every, can and should be used in every area of teaching. I was thinking about how I used to give my kids in science class, I give them a task like, your job is to build a machine to turn the page of a book. And that's all I would give them. And they had to solve the problem of creating a series of events, we call it a Rube Goldberg machine, to turn the page of a book. And they had to work together to do it. But it was a problem they had to solve and break it down into a number of discrete tasks. And listening to what Sean was saying, it kind of sounds like that would be computational thinking. I know you guys have a lot more experience in computational thinking. AJ, do you have experiences like that you can share?
Yeah, I would say before I was a computer science teacher, I taught elementary school, and even thinking back to just running a classroom in elementary school, you really have to set up a bunch of things. You've got to break down a full day of what's going on. So, I mean, beyond just like teaching a curriculum, just like almost anything that you come in contact with or anything that you do in life, like I think Sean mentioned building a deck or something like that. So I think anything that a task that you need to complete, you're going through these processes. You may not hit all 6 of them, but you are definitely going through some of these processes. And, it's really about that vocabulary piece to me. It's like, what are kids hearing as far as vocabulary, words that mean I'm working on this part. I'm working on decomposition of this project. I'm working on abstraction. I'm trying to get rid of the things I don't need. What's the algorithm I need? So for me, it's that common vocabulary piece that can be really helpful for students. And again, I just feel like it can be, math, science, most definitely are big biggies that would follow these exactly, because there are such patterns in writing a science report or trying to do experiments. You're going to go through a process. And math, math is definitely a decomposition. You're breaking down problem into pieces to get a result. So I don't know how you feel about that, Chris. Do you feel like that's kind of like the way you would think is, or do you have any other thoughts around that?
Yeah, I've been thinking about specific activities that I've done in my tech classes with my middle school students, and the elements here really do fit well. For example, if they have a robot that they're trying to program to navigate an obstacle course, they tackle it one segment at a time. How do I get it to move through this part? And then looking at each part individually, putting all of the code together to have it eventually travel through the whole course is definitely an example of decomposition. When you're teaching kids how to do effective research online, they're learning how to, in other classes in other content areas, they're learning how to read for comprehension, to weed out information that pieces of it that doesn't matter at all, and just pulling out what is important to them. So there's the abstraction, and computer science is all about algorithms, creating simplest rules, and with coding you want the simplest set of instructions to solve the problem. So I definitely see it in computer science and across the board. What do you think, Jeff?
You got me thinking about teaching math. And we are always trying to help kids understand when they read a story problem, a real life problem, that there's information in there that they don't need. And that seems like that would fit the abstraction side of computational thinking, about looking at the problem, figuring out what's in the information, what information is in there that they need to solve the problem, and putting aside the information that they don't need. Does that seem accurate to you, AJ?
Oh, absolutely. I know that CS and math have a really, close components. I mean, a lot of math people are computer science people, just because of the way, coding works, and, need to have an understanding of math. But absolutely, just abstraction is a huge one for me, especially, is really trying to get the kids to narrow down their view or their need for that activity that we're working on. Because we all know that kids can really get grandiose in their ideas, and they want to bring in everything, but it's really kind of trying to get them to focus on what the task is and how that would best be served with less information if it doesn't need to have all that extra information.
So I was having a conversation with my wife the other day. She teaches 8th grade ELA, and I was showing her a chart with the different elements of computational thinking, because it was interesting me so much in realizing that I do this kind of naturally, but I also recognize that a lot of people don't. So I asked her to what extent she is a computational thinker, and she looked at the different elements, and she just openly acknowledged that she was not good at certain ones of those. Where I felt they were strengths for me, she felt like they were not strengths for her. And so that made me think that we do need to be aware that a lot of teachers and a lot of students, this will come more naturally for some people than others. And even though it is maybe something in their standards that they should be doing, some people will struggle more with this than other people, and it's maybe hard for me to understand that because I don't struggle with it, and it does seem natural to me. What are your thoughts about that?
So I agree with that, and that's true of anything that we're working on. There's going to be people who are comfortable, more comfortable, or less comfortable with that. But I think it's important to note that it's possible in every area that we teach, and that it isn't just a tech-based approach. It's a non-tech-based approach as well, allowing it to get into all the different areas that we teach kids, but that we also need to make sure that we're patient with people when we are approaching this. And it isn't just a new thing, another thing on their plate, but something that should be and can be, and maybe already is, being woven into what they're doing on a daily basis.
And I know that computational thinking was pretty much designed for computer science or STEM classes. I mean, that's kind of where the standard came from and the idea behind it. But I do feel like you guys have been saying that it does weave into pretty much every other curriculum's problem-solving method. It would just be interesting. I would find it fascinating to kind of go into the standards and see which ones really connect with which and how closely entwined they really are. It would be kind of an interesting activity for teachers to do, to get teachers of different curriculum together and just, what are your standards around problem solving and critical thinking, and each bring to the table their terminologies, their vocab for those pieces, and to really kind of see how, how closely they do fit, and to see which ones go with which. I think that would be kind of fascinating.
Yeah, the more we talk about this, the more I realize that it is not only an important part of every content area across the board, but it is, as we've been saying, it's already ingrained in what we're doing. It isn't something to add to our plates. It's a powerful tool that some may struggle with more than others, but it is absolutely essential for tackling a lot of the challenges that we face.
I think it's important to realize as well that we're not just talking about meeting standards for the kids to graduate or to move on to the next grade, but we're talking about setting them up for life. I mean, these skills are not skills that are just needed in fifth grade science. It's, can you solve problems, break down problems, and factor in what information you need or don't need in anything that you do as an adult, I suspect, as well. So it's important to help the kids understand that we're trying to get them ready for life beyond school.
Yeah, I love that. These are life skills, exactly like you said. I mean, just to function in a society, you need to be able to go through these processes. These elements are critical. Well said, Jeff.
That's a great way to put it, and that wraps it up nicely. Wow, we took a deep dive into a powerful topic today. Thanks to my co-hosts AJ and Jeff, and to Sean Wasson for taking the time to share with us his knowledge and experience with CT. Please join us for our next episode, where we will continue our conversation about computational thinking by taking a closer look at instructional practices that can help any educator start using CT in any classroom, including how to go from unplugged CT activities to tech-integrated CT activities. As always, we want to hear from you as well. Whether you know a great educator doing something awesome in CT or CS, or are just curious how the team can support you and your school, please contact the MLTI and LTT teams at the Maine Department of Education by emailing us at doe-ltt@maine.gov. And remember, if your oven breaks down while you're cooking a holiday meal, just follow the sage advice of every IT professional and try turning it off and back on again. Class dismissed.